jump into chapters 8 and 9. Okay, so in chapters 8 and 9, chapter 8, we're going to be talking about how we keep track of our guests' balances, right? The front office, the front desk is the one who keeps track of how much money our guests are spending, okay? All right. So in accounting, we have a T account. Who's ever heard of the T account? Who's never heard of T accounts? Okay, awesome. What letter do you think it makes? A T. Yep, you see it right here on the board, right? It's a T account. We have credits and we have debits. Okay, how many of you have taken an accounting class before? Okay, so that makes sense why you're the only one who knows what a T account is. That's awesome. So T accounts, we basically have our credits and our debits. Okay, debits are going to be on the left-hand side of our T account. And then we have credits. Basically, debits are the charges that our guests are incurring, and then the credits are the payments. Okay. So every night when we're in the hotel, right? Every night, the night audit, which is that overnight shift, they are posting. I guess my PC in there. There we go. They are posting to the accounts. So what they're doing is they're posting the charges for that day to their account, and then we're going to compare that, what they've charged so far, to what we took at the very beginning. So when we swipe a card at the beginning of a reservation, not only are we checking for the credit of the room and tax, but we're also checking for incidentals. So who is not familiar with incidentals, the term incidentals? Okay, cool. So incidentals are all of those extra things that are not room and tax. So room service or snacks from the pantry or spa services, golf, anything that we can say we're going to charge to the room, those are called incidentals. So when we charge, when we take a reservation and we check that the guest in, when we swipe that credit card, we are checking for the balance of the food and the room and board, like the room and tax. And then also most hotels have a minimum incidental charge per day. So usually like 50, depending on the hotel. Resorts are going to have a little bit higher incidental charges because more people post and charge to the room. Whereas if you are a Hampton or maybe like a True that just has a free breakfast but has a little snack shop, we may do like a $25 to $50 incidentals per day because they're not necessarily maybe going to charge that much. So full service hotels typically have a higher incidental rate. And then at night, once that night audit goes through, we post those accounts, we're going to be like, okay, this person's getting close to what we've already pre-authorized. We may have to reauthorize a higher amount. We pre-authorized $200 for their whole stay. They've already spent $150. So we might need to come back and reauthorize a higher amount so they can continue spending and charging to their room. Okay. So this is what we're looking at the T account. We're looking at debits and credits. At the end of the day, this is one reason why I love accounting math. Okay. Accounting math, everything has to equal. For all the debits, the total of the debits, there has to be a total credits as well to match as the same number so they cancel each other out. Okay. And so when we come back from Houston, I'll share the folio so you can kind of see how they charge by the room every night, and they charge the taxes, and at the end they'll make the one payment. Whatever the balance is, that's what we have to pay to post to the card that's on file. Okay. Any questions about T accounts? So sometimes we have non-guest accounts. These are basically accounts that maybe somebody's coming into our restaurant. They're not eating, they're not staying at our hotel, but they're a guest of the restaurant. So it's a non-guest account. When someone checks in, we're going to have a guest account, and that's going to keep track of their entire stay. And then we have a separate area that's keeping track of all those charges that are happening that are not related to a guest room. So they may just have just food and beverage only, or bar service or whatever. We also sometimes will have it for companies. We may have a company that does like a party, or a company that comes in and hosts a meeting in our boardroom. We may have a non-guest account for them for that. Okay. Folios. Who can tell me what a folio is? What they think it might be? Yes, Oscar. Yeah, so it's kind of like it's like a receipt at the end. A folio is essentially is basically our T account, right? It's all the debits and the credits of our T account. It's not in that format of a T account. It's all just listed, right? But the folio is just basically how we keep track of the guest's charges. So it's basically just the guest account essentially, okay? And then, like I said, anytime somebody charges, we call it posting to the folio. Yep, absolutely. Now, sometimes, not always, kind of more rarely, we have paid in advance guests where they've paid in full. Okay. That may be that they've checked in and it's a resort and it's our summertime. So we require them to be paid in full when they come. Or it may be that they check in and they want to pay in cash, which is totally fine. We can accept, well, I can say we can accept cash. It depends. Some hotels are going cashless now. But if we accept cash for payment for the room, we can absolutely do that. Does that mean that we don't need a credit card on file? No, we still need a credit card on file. Why would we need a credit card on file if they're paying cash already? The room's already paid for. Any damages, potential damages, if they smoke in the room, if they break something, any kind of property damages, something goes missing, we still need a credit card to charge for those things, right? So if someone just pays cash and doesn't put a credit card down, then that should be a pretty big red flag that that room may potentially be messed up when they check out, because if they're paying cash, we still need to hold that. Now we're going to tell them, I'm not going to, I've already posted the charges, like the payments for the cash. So I still need a card for incidentals. And also, pretty much we just say incidentals. We're not going to tell the guest, I need a card. So just in case you smoke in the room, we can charge your card. Sounds kind of weird to say that, right? So we just need a card for, they're like, oh, well, I don't need incidentals. I'm not going to order anything. Well, just in case, it's our company policy that we have this. It's not going to be charged. If you don't use it, then the authorization just falls off. So sometimes though, if they are paid in advance, we can do what's called a no post, which means they can't go to the restaurant and say charge it to the room. If there's not a credit card on file for us to be able to do that, then it's no post. They basically are relinquishing their privilege of charging to their account without, whatever they have to charge to the room. So we can do no post status. So if the server goes in and they try to sign for the room, for the meal, they go to put it in, it should tell them that they have no post. They have no ability to charge to the guest room. All right, so credit monitoring. This is what I was talking about just a few moments ago. At nighttime, when we run that audit, it's going to tell us which one of our guests are approaching that maximum of the credit they've already extended. We've already pre-authorized. Now for us, that's called the house limit. That's set by us. Okay. What is that? Incidentals that we pre-authorize for. And then if they're getting close to that total, then we want to basically get them to come back down to the front desk and reauthorize a card. The floor limit is authorized by the credit card companies. So the credit card company may say that your card can't have more than a $2,000 single transaction on it, right? Without calling the company to approve and authorize that you're making that charge. Okay. And so the floor limit set by the credit card company, we have no control over it. The house limit is set by us. Okay. Now, what happens if they get close to that credit limit? How do we get them to come back down to the front desk? Do we just say, hey, can you come down to the front desk? We're going to lock them out of their room. Okay. And that sounds very harsh. Okay. Let me say it a little bit differently. We're going to basically lock them out of the room. Essentially, what we're going to do is we're going to lock them out of the system, right? And so when they go to use their room key, instead of the light flashing green, the door opening, the light's going to flash red, right? Now, when they come down and they say, David, my key card is not working. And I'm not going to say, oh, Mr. Smith, that's because you don't have any credit with us. No, we're not going to say that, right? We're just going to say, let me check on that for a moment. And then we open up you do the whole typing thing and let me open up your account, remind me the room number. And then they come through and you're like, oh, Mr. Smith, it looks like we need to reauthorize for additional incidentals because you've met the maximum for the incidentals already. So we just need to go ahead and reauthorize, and they're like, oh, okay, that sounds good. That makes sense. And then you can just reprogram that key card. Yes. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yep. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. We would pre-authorize for a higher amount, an additional amount. Absolutely. Yeah. And that would cover that original the rest of their stay. And then if they don't use any of that, then it just falls off, just like the original pre-authorization. Yeah. Yeah. So because what will happen is we'll just come in and we'll pre-authorize an additional amount because that original authorization is already on there. So we'll authorize for an additional amount just to make sure that the card is valid and will go through. And then that will be valid for the extended the remainder of their stay. Yeah, if they don't, and so here's the thing. When we are pre-authorizing on a credit card, that's just holding that. Let's just say that this credit card, when I swipe it, this total charge that's on this potential account will all go through. Okay. Now, if we do it on a debit card, that's why we have to train our front staff to understand the difference between a credit card and a debit card. What happens when it's on a debit card? Well, it doesn't immediately go through. It basically puts those funds on hold, right? And so then what happens when they check out is then we actually charge that amount. That original hold is up to the bank to release, to realize that, oh, this is the actual charge. This pre-authorization was just a hold and we need to release it. The issue that we run into with debit cards is, though, that it actually holds those funds. So let's say somebody has $1,000 in their bank account, right? And their original authorization is for 400. So that's going to hold that on hold, right? And then when we go charge when they check out, we charge them $400. So they now have $800 on hold, which means of their $1,000, they only have $200 to spend. And so if they go out and they're on vacation and they spend more money, then the bank may charge them overdraft fees because the bank thinks they've overdrawn their account, when in reality that first 400 was just a pre-hold, just a hold. It's up to the bank to release that. And so that's why with our front desk agents, we need to educate them with why it's important to look at the card. And Visas, MasterCards, they have debit, right? So if it says the word debit, we need to explain to the guest what that means, right? Now, the guest can put a credit card when they check in. If they want to pay with their debit card at the end, they can do that, right? And so that's the main difference between credit cards and debit cards. And so we want to make sure that our guests, because what we don't want to have happen is our guests are overdrawn, right? And then they're going to come back, they're going to look at their bank statement, and they're going to say, you charged me twice. And then we have to explain to them at that point, and then at that point, we're more reactionary instead of proactive. We want to be proactive. So most hotels, if you look when you check in the next time you go to a hotel or there's somebody going on a visit for the hotel, chances are there's going to be a little sign that says something about debit cards on the front desk. That will basically inform the guest about that. Okay. Yes.
So wait, like for a debit card,
Uh-huh.
that shows up automatically, like as the pending.
Yeah, but so it does show up automatic. So it still shows up as pending, right? So like if you charge into your debit card, it shows as like a pending charge, but that pending charge is still taking them, like still holding the money out. And then when we charge, that pending charge is still there. The actual charge happens, and then it's up to that bank to release that pending charge. Yep. Okay. Any questions? Would that answer your question? Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of tricky because we don't want our guests to, especially if you think about it. Like, I went to a hotel for a conference in Galveston. And so I have an alert set up on my phone that anytime my credit card is like swiped beyond a certain amount, it automatically sends me a notification. And so I knew because of my travel, my hotel was going to be about $500. So I swiped my card at check-in, and before I get to the elevator, I get a text message from my credit card company, and it's like, there's been an authorization for $875 on your card. And I'm like, what? That's a lot of money. And then I realized, well, they had a $75 per day incidentals. And then also when they authorize at the very beginning, they're doing the entire taxes. Whereas when I travel for work, I'm tax exempt for the state taxes. So that also will take some off, right? But that's where I'm just like, oh my gosh, I just got a notification that I thought I was only going to be paying 500, but imagine that was my debit card. And that's an extra $375 that I had planned for going out to eat, going to Six Flags, and now that's held up in that way. So it can make a huge difference. Let me go back. Sorry. Charge purchases. So this basically allows us to connect with our system to make sure that our guests have that privilege or that opportunity to continue charging. Okay. Sometimes we have to do account corrections. Okay. Meaning, let's say this has happened before. We have a conference of teachers coming in, and some people forget to give you their tax exempt form when you check in. And then they go to check out 2 days later, and they're like, oh no, I shouldn't be paying taxes because I'm a teacher and I'm tax exempt. Here's my form. Well, now you have to go back to the previous 2 nights and do a correction voucher, a correction of taking that tax off, because those taxes were included in all of our accounting for those 2 nights. And so a correction voucher basically is just like it can be a piece of paper more often than not, because everything is digital. it's really just kind of a note in the system of this is why this is being corrected. Okay. Sometimes we also do a couple of different ways where we can, give complimentary stuff. So there needs to be a reason why we gave something complimentary. This compensation for poor service. The other way that you might hear this in the industry is guest recovery. So a guest recovery effort, meaning that something has gone wrong and we're trying to recover that guest from that poor guest service experience. Okay. So that guest service recovery is really key. And we also, with that voucher, we want to make sure to say why. Why are we giving this complimentary room? Why are we comping a room night? Why are we giving them dinner? Why are we giving them this? Okay. There always needs to be an explanation. Yes.
I watched this YouTube video. I was trying to find sharing class,
Uh-huh.
Boy would, help settle confusion. Well, on there, these people went and checked into a hotel, and unfortunately, the manager, the employee was like, "I'm sorry, we can't take you." And they said, are all the rooms booked? And they said, no. They said, we don't serve the kind. And those people said, well, can we have if you're not going to take, whatever. And they said, well, could we have, we need at least something, for the way you treat us, you were racist against us, whatever. And they said, can we have like a guest recovery? And the person and the manager goes, why would I give that to you? I'm not serving you. You're not in my hotel. So she kicked him out. And so I'm wondering, like, what do you think about that? Like, how do you, I just thought that was playing terrible.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. That type of situation is terrible. It's unfortunate that happened. And I would assume that if that, I feel like that goes beyond guest service recovery, in the sense that in reality, if they're not a guest at the hotel, then we're not technically doing guest service recovery. So I can understand why they said that to begin with. I cannot understand why they said what they said to begin with, but that's outrageous. But
these people went to the police.
Yeah, I would say that's the course of reaction, that course of action for that, which unfortunately it does not look good on that hotel. And so, there are, I'm trying to choose my words. Unfortunately, there are horrible human beings in this world. And we can't control that. All that we can control is our own actions. And if we see something like that happen, then all we can do is guarantee that nobody else will feel that way in my care as a guest service agent. So, yes. What? I have not. That's the Anna, whatever. She just got kicked off of Dancing with Stars. I don't watch that show either. I know they talked about it in one of the podcasts I listened to.
Yeah.
And how they were glamorizing the fact that she's a convicted person and she's now on TV with a bedazzled ankle bracelet.
Yeah. Well, she was not impressive. I don't want her. They were exploiting her on the show, but the basis of her thing is that she came over to the US and said that she had a $200 million trust fund.
Right.
And so part of so many of her charges where she went to these luxurious New York hotels.
Yeah.
And all these things. And everything was always charged stuff. But
yeah.
It was just kind of like a bit of a con of making the staff believe that you have. I'm just wondering if you had seen it.
I have not seen that. But I've heard about it.
Yeah. It's an Netflix show about the girl. Yeah. She's 0.
Yeah. So every every folio, every room has its own folio, its own account. So if I've been charging something to a room and then all of a sudden they say, oh, by the way, I'm going to pay for this extra room, then there needs to be some kind of transfer documentation about why those funds are being transferred over to other folio. We could also combine folios, right? At check-in, if we know we're going to be doing that, we can combine them into and make sure that the payment is all on one payment. So we want to make sure that that is all going in the correct place. Cash banks, again, some hotels are going cashless, so this really isn't an issue. But sometimes in the food and beverage side of the outlets, this is still something that people will require. So cash banks is basically just think about the money that starts in your register. Okay. As a server, when I worked for TGI Fridays, I had to have a cash bank of $25 to $40 of my own money in my pocket so that I could make change if I needed to. Right. When I worked at Cheesecake Factory, the bartenders was our cash bank. If I needed to pay someone with cash and give them change, I'd go to the bartender, they give me their change and give that to the guest. Okay. So cash banks, we typically will have at the front desk. When I was at the La Quinta, we had $100 cash bank. So if guests want to come and buy a soda or whatever, they want to pay cash for their room. Our cash drawer always had less than $100 or less in it. So if I got to a point where I was taking in a lot of cash, then I would do a deposit and make a note of that on my accounting that I made a deposit during the shift. Okay. Essentially, what we're looking at is we take all of our cash receipts. Okay. An overage is what happens when we take that initial bank out, right? Let's say I have all my cash receipts and they total up to $500. I take out my original $50 that I started with. I should have $500 in cash, right? If I have more or if I have less, then it's out of balance. And I need to figure out why. Maybe there's something to pay with a certificate. Somebody, maybe I gave the wrong change and I'm short versus having too much. Okay. So being short is not necessarily a good thing because that means we've given somebody more change than they needed. And then a due back. This is one that I never really experienced at the front desk, but let me give you an example of when a due back has happened. When I worked at the Sheraton Gunther Hotel, I was a server in the restaurant, right? There was one cashier for the whole restaurant. If someone's going to pay with cash, then I would go to the cashier, they would make the change, I'd take it to the guest. Okay. The end of the night, when I as a server, if I was done, I would give them my server report. And I was due any tips that were on my credit card slips, right? And so if the cashier gives me all of my tips for my credit cards, then their bank would be less than what they started. And then that's called a due back. So that basically that due back has to show how do we get that money back up to the original bank amount. Now they have a transaction form that says I gave David $75 in cash for his tips, for his tip out, right? And then she'd fold up my report and send it in with that. So there's a lot of tracking. There's a lot of things that has to go with that accounting.
So it's best to tip, I'm just learning, so it's best to tip somebody, in cash then.
It depends. I mean, I like to tip on my card because then I get points for it. So it just depends. It depends on the situation. I mean, if you are the server, I preferred tips in cash because then I have to claim them on my taxes. I probably shouldn't put that in the recording, but that was 15 years ago, so they can't come back to me, right? I don't know what the statute of limitations are on that. All right, so let's take a look at any questions about accounting at the front desk. Okay, let's take a look at chapter 9. Let me stop the recording.